Have you ever noticed how some of the kindest people you know are also the most exhausted people you know? Not tired from work, tired from something quieter, from being the one who always answers, always understands, always makes room for everyone else's needs before their own. And have you noticed something else? That this exhaustion never seems to earn them the thing they were actually hoping for, to be loved back with the same care they keep giving out. Now ask yourself honestly, have you been that person? Have you said yes when your whole body was screaming no, just to avoid disappointing someone who wouldn't have thought twice about disappointing you? This is where we need to start, because the problem was never your kindness. The problem is that nobody ever taught you how to be kind without also teaching people they can take from you endlessly and never be asked to give anything back. Here's a truth that might be uncomfortable to sit with. Kindness without any boundary attached to it doesn't read as generosity to most people. It reads as availability. And anything that's endlessly available eventually stops being valued, not because people are cruel by nature, but because human beings are built to conserve effort, and if something requires no effort to access, most people simply stop making any. You've probably felt this already, without having language for it. The friend who only calls when something's wrong. The partner who takes your patience as a given rather than a gift. The family member who saves their worst moods for you specifically, because they already know you'll absorb it and stay anyway. None of this happened because you're unlovable. It happened because somewhere along the way, your kindness stopped having any edges, and people, consciously or not, learn to walk exactly as far into a person as that person allows. So the real question isn't whether you should keep being kind. Of course you should. The question is why kindness and boundaries got positioned as opposites in your mind in the first place, as if protecting your own peace automatically makes you colder, harsher, less generous than you actually are. That's simply not true, and understanding why it feels true is where we need to go next. Most of us learned very early that our value came from how easy we were to be around. Being agreeable got rewarded. Being accommodating got praised. Somewhere in that early conditioning, a quiet equation got built without anyone stating it out loud. If I make myself difficult in any way, even by having a limit, I risk losing the people I depend on. And once that equation is installed, it doesn't just apply to childhood. It runs your adult relationships too, showing up as the instinct to say yes before you've even checked in with whether you actually want to. The guilt that arrives instantly the moment you consider disappointing someone. The reflex to over-explain a simple no until it sounds like an apology instead of a decision. Here's what almost nobody tells you about this pattern though, and it changes everything once you actually see it. The people who take advantage of unlimited kindness are rarely doing it maliciously in the way you might imagine. Most of them aren't sitting somewhere calculating how to drain you. They're simply responding to the information you've given them, that your yes is reliable, that your discomfort won't actually change your behavior, that pushing past your limits doesn't cost them anything. You trained this without meaning to, the same way anyone trains a pattern through repetition, not through a single dramatic moment, but through hundreds of small ones where a limit was felt and then quietly overridden anyway. And this is exactly why simply trying harder to be kind never fixes the exhaustion. If anything, it makes it worse, because more kindness, without any boundary attached, just gives the pattern more fuel. This is the part we need to understand next, why kindness on its own was never actually the full picture of what healthy generosity requires. Real kindness was never supposed to be unconditional access. It was supposed to be a choice, renewed consciously, not a default setting that runs whether you're actually willing or not. Somewhere along the way, a lot of people absorbed a distorted version of what it means to be a good person, as if goodness requires the complete erasure of your own limits, as if the moment you protect yourself, you've somehow betrayed the values you're trying to live by. But think about the kindest people you actually admire, not the ones who are simply the most agreeable, the ones you genuinely respect. Almost none of them are endlessly available. They give generously, but from a place that has actual walls around it, which is precisely what makes their generosity feel meaningful instead of automatic. This is the distinction worth sitting with. Boundaries don't make kindness smaller, they make it real, because kindness that costs you nothing to give isn't actually a gift. It's just an absence of resistance. The version of kindness worth having is the kind that comes from an actual decision, made freely, by someone who genuinely could have said no and chose to say yes anyway. That kind of kindness is rare, and it's rare specifically because it requires the very thing most people are afraid of, the willingness to occasionally disappoint someone in order to remain someone worth trusting. So how does this actually change in practice, not just in understanding? It starts with noticing the exact moment your body signals resistance, before your mind has time to explain it away. That small hesitation right before you say yes, the tightness that shows up when someone asks for something you don't actually want to give. Most people override that signal so quickly, they barely register it happened at all. The first real shift is simply letting that hesitation exist for a second longer before responding, long enough to actually ask yourself what you want, instead of immediately defaulting to what keeps things comfortable for everyone else. The second shift is learning to let a no stand without wrapping it in 3 layers of justification. Over-explaining a boundary doesn't make it kinder. It usually just signals that the boundary is negotiable if the other person pushes back hard enough, which teaches them, again without anyone meaning to, that your limits are really just opening offers. A simple, warm no, without an apology tour attached to it, is almost always more respectful to both people than an elaborate explanation designed to soften a decision that didn't actually need softening. The third shift is separating the discomfort of disappointing someone from actual evidence that you did something wrong. These get fused together for most people who've spent years prioritizing everyone else's comfort over their own, but they are not the same thing. Disappointing someone is simply what happens when their want and your limit don't align. It doesn't automatically mean you've caused harm. Learning to tolerate that discomfort without immediately trying to fix it is one of the most important skills in this entire process, because that discomfort was never actually dangerous. It was just unfamiliar. And the fourth shift, maybe the most important one, is paying attention to how people respond once you start holding these limits. Not with suspicion, but with honest observation. The people who were relating to the real you will stay, even if they need a moment to adjust to a version of you that no longer overextends automatically. The people who were really only relating to your availability will get uncomfortable fast, sometimes accusing you of having changed, sometimes withdrawing entirely. This isn't proof you did something wrong. It's information about which relationships were actually built on mutual care, and which ones were quietly built on your endless accommodation. None of this requires becoming colder, more guarded, or less generous than you actually are. It requires understanding that kindness, without any boundary, isn't a purer form of generosity. It's simply generosity with nothing protecting it, and eventually, unprotected things get worn down to nothing. The goal was never to give less. It was to give from a place solid enough that giving doesn't quietly cost you your own well-being every single time. Because here's the truth underneath all of this. You can be warm and still have limits. You can care deeply and still say no. You can be the kind of person people genuinely trust, not because you're endlessly available, but because when you do show up, it actually means something, since it came from an actual choice rather than an automatic reflex you never gave yourself permission to override. If any part of this resonated with you, if you recognized the moment your kindness quietly turned into an obligation you never agreed to, leave a comment and let me know what stood out. Chances are, you're not the only one relearning where the line actually is. Thanks for listening to episodes of Kynn. Take care of your mind, and I'll see you in the next episode.